It starts with the teeth, actually, like Dr. Price said, the teeth tell the tale. And then it begins with kind of joint pains because your bones need animal foods. Your body needs animal foods. And I would suggest if you're going to have animal foods, find a farmer near you that's doing it right. Stick by your convictions of helping the planet, but know that it's not going to necessarily come to pass by avoiding animal products.
Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, Jaye Anne, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kaylee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for. Hello and welcome to another episode of Feminine Alchemy. Jaye Anne, your host, and we've got Julie Dean Richards on as always, and we've got a very special guest today, Hilda Gore. So everybody say hi.
Hey.
Hilda, oh my gosh, I'm like floored that we have this interview. I'm flustered a little bit too, because Hilda's going to talk to us about a really important, powerful topic on the importance of real food, the Weston A Price Foundation, which changed my life, and just like eating ancestrally. I love it. I'm so excited for this. Again, I told you I was going to get flustered. So, Hilda, come on. Hello. Say hi. Do your thing. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I am so happy to be here. I feel kind of, flustered and befuddled and surprised myself at being in this place, Jaye. To be honest with you, I found the foundation probably about 15, maybe even 20 years ago. And at first I didn't pay them too much mind. I was like, okay, they're about real food. Okay, that's very nice, until I dove deeper into their information and I was like, what we think is food in the grocery store, a lot of it is pseudo food or even frankenfood. And of course, real food is what nourishes the most deeply. It just made so much sense to me. So when I did a second look, when I did a double take, I dove in at feet first. And now I've been the host of the Wise Traditions podcast for over 10 years. And I get to see Sally every other week at staff meetings. And I'm blown away by the privilege of bringing kind of these wise traditions to the fore. And I want to be really clear about this. These are not my wise traditions. They're not Sally's wise traditions. They're not even Dr. Price's wise traditions. They belong to the people who've populated this planet since the beginning of time. So these traditions have been handed down, and I do feel like it's a huge privilege to be able to share them here today and wherever I can.
I love that. And I just want to jump in, just so people know who Hilda is. I'm going to read your bio real quick because I just think it's brilliant. So Hilda Labrador Gore, aka Holistic Hilda, which was where most people know her as Holistic Hilda. Hilda is a cheerleader for cultivating well-being based on ancient health practices that have stood the test of time. She is an integrative integrative nutrition certified health coach and world traveler, committed to uncovering traditions essential to restoring energy and vitality. She has explored Mongolia, Ethiopia, Ecuador, Kenya, Australia, and Albania, to name a few places she's been, bringing the best of the wisdom and health practices she's encountered on her social media platforms, her YouTube channel, and on the Wise Traditions podcast that she hosts and produces on behalf of the Weston A Price Foundation. So you can find Hilda at Holistic Hilda, but Hilda is actually a friend of mine. She's interviewed me on the Weston A Price Foundation's podcast called Wise Tradition, which I highly, highly recommend. And she's a joy to be around. She's always happy, upbeat, as you can hear in her voice. And I just wanted to start and ask you, because you are such a world traveler. I know these are only a couple of the places that you've been, but I would love to ask you, where is your favorite place that you have traveled to? Like, what's one of your top 3 favorite places?
Okay, maybe I was wondering if I could even mention 3, but because it's so hard to pick. It's like asking a mom, who's your favorite kid? It's like they're all beautiful and unique in their own way. But I've got to start with Mexico because my mom is from Mexico. And whenever I go there, I'm like, something about it just really resonates and calls to me. Like it just feels like I'm in the right spot. I feel like these are my people. I don't know if it's just the tone in which they speak or the ease I have with the people or the beauty of the culture. I was recently in Tulum actually, and I got to go to the cenotes. And these are underground kind of water caves that are all connected in the Yucatan Peninsula. And so it's just so beautiful to be able to go to these freshwater pools and swim and think these have been here for, centuries, and that we get the privilege of swimming in them and seeing the bats overhead and thinking about what it was like 1,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. I mean, it's just fascinating. So I love Mexico. And then I also love Mongolia, which is on the other side of the planet between Russia and China. And I got to go there with Mary Ruddick. I think it was in 2023. And I was blown away by how rugged it was, but also how resilient the Mongolian people were. And I got to meet with some Kazakh eagle hunters, which just blows my mind to this day. These men and women who use the eagles and train them to hunt for food. And so they'll bring back prey like foxes or rabbits, the eagles will. And then the Mongolian people will use their food, eat their flesh for food and their fur for clothing. I mean, it was just mind blowing. So those are my top two, I think, right now.
Oh, I love that. I remember that trip to Mongolia, like following you and looking at all your stuff. And we're trying to get Mary to come on the podcast too, because she's so amazing.
I
And
know. She is. I'll talk to her.
yeah, you talked to her. I texted her, but we'll see what she says. But you and Mary travel everywhere, and these travels sound so amazing. But a lot of it seems like it was inspired by some of the work that Weston A Price did, Dr. Weston A Price. And I'd love to just dive into the foundation a little bit, because I'm sure there are people listening. They're like, I don't know what the Weston A Price Foundation is. Like, why is it important? What do you mean about real food? So, Hilda, do you mind explaining to us, like, who was Dr. Price? What did he do? Like, what is this foundation all about?
I love telling this story. I sometimes feel like I want to start it like a kid's book. Once upon a time, there was a doctor, but he wasn't just a doctor. He was a dentist and a researcher. And this is really true. He was a man who was originally from Canada, moved to Ohio, and he had a dental clinic. He had a practice. So just picture this. Literally, he's like checking out all the kids' teeth. But while he was doing it, you all, he noticed that the kids had bad behavior. They had poor posture, poor hearing, their teeth were crowded, they had cavities. And he was like, what is happening? Because he could see that something wasn't right. And at the same time, he got National Geographic magazine. And so he would compare these healthy, hardy people with the beautiful smiles, no crowded teeth, who looked, very strong and hale and hearty, like I said. And he was like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. I've got to figure out, number one, do these people really exist around the world that are showing up in this magazine? And number two, if they do, what are they eating? Because whatever they're eating is doing them good. And as a dentist, he often said, the teeth tell the tale. So what's happening in our mouths is a mirror of what's happening in the whole body. And so he was starting to put two and two together. So he grabbed his wife, Florence, and every summer for like 10 years, I don't know if she was a school teacher or what, I have to do more research on that. But every year for 10 years, they traveled the world to find these people. They went to Switzerland and the South Sea Pacific Islands and Scotland, Alaska, Kenya, Peru, all over the place. And they meticulously kept records of what they observed among untouched indigenous people groups. Why does that matter? Because even in the time of Dr. Price, some isolated people groups were getting exposure to the displacing foods of modern commerce. That's what Dr. Price called them. Basically, he meant flour and sugar and oils and other canned foods were coming into these people and changing their food traditions. And he noted that as those foods crept in, chronic conditions and sickness started to infiltrate formerly extremely healthy tribes. So he was looking for, even in the 1930s, these untouched people groups, he found them. Of course, their diets were radically different. So the people in Switzerland were having milk and cheese and butter and maybe, sourdough bread. And then in Kenya, it was meat and milk and blood. And Alaska, it was whale blubber and seal oil, and so it was really different everywhere, but they had things in common. Every people group, the happiest people groups on the planet, were eating local, organic, seasonal, and traditional foods. Basically, it was right what was around them, and they were thriving. And so this is the basis for the Weston A Price Foundation. We took some information from the work of Dr. Price, we continued researching it and finding more things that all these people had in common in terms of their diet. And we came up with 11 principles. These are 11 dietary guidelines, for lack of a better way of framing it, that people can incorporate into their diets, whatever their diet is, wherever they live, and they can start to live healthier lives.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I have used some of these principles because we got to get into them because now everyone's like, "What are the 11 principles?" But I just as a testimony of this, and like maybe Jaye Anne wants to share her story too. But for me, I was able to use this information to heal 4 cavities in my son, just using this. Yeah.
Reversing cavities. People think it's not a thing, but it is, right?
Yes. And for those who are like skeptical, we did the whole thing. We went to the dentist, like the x-rays, like they looked at his teeth and they were like, he's got 4 cavities. He's got to heal those cavities. And I used the information from the Weston A Price Foundation, which is largely based on teeth. Like you said, the teeth tell the tale. And I was able to reverse those cavities and he didn't have any. So none of my kids have had to have that now. So obviously these principles are amazing, but I'd love to hear your story with the foundation, Jaye Anne.
Yeah, it was 2011, 2012, around there. And I had my second baby. I was super depleted. And there was 2 babies in 2 years and all of that, like and I was breastfeeding both of them, and it was just like pulling all the minerals out of my body. And someone handed me Sally's book, Nourishing Traditions, out of nowhere and was like, here, read this. And it was like, came down to me. And I just consumed it. And I did everything in the book. I made all the recipes. It was like an experiment in my kitchen. And it helped me clear out a lot of the emotional and physical pain I was having, because really my biggest problem was I was so nutritionally depleted. And it improved my gut health. I lost 35 pounds sitting on the couch. Like, when I say Weston A Price Foundation changed my life, it changed everything about my life.
Oh my
Everything.
gosh, that makes me so happy. And I want to be clear right now. No one has to turn into a trad wife to eat this way, because I know it's a trend, right? Like everyone's making their sourdough and they're making their kids Oreo cookies from scratch. Like that's amazing. And I don't take anything away from those people, but I know how busy our lives can be. And I just want to say you can eat this Wise Traditions way without, spending all day making your own ferments and stuff. I love to make some things, but the main thing I make is the Wise Traditions podcast. So I benefit from farmers markets and from people I believe in and local farms that give me the food that nourishes me deeply. And I would say, actually, if we're just going to get into it a little bit, I can give the preview of principle number 1 of the Wise Traditions guidelines, kind of for how to eat and live, is Dr. Price noted that the healthiest peoples had no refined or denatured foods in their diet. So that means no packaged and canned stuff. They were eating it single ingredient food. You don't have to read the ingredient label when it's like meat or eggs or fish or seafood, like it's all right there. And these foods I'm mentioning are so nutrient dense. That's another principle. Principle number 3 is that he noticed that there were fat soluble activators, vitamins A and E and D and K, which he didn't know what it was at the time, but he knew there were vitamins that helped the body absorb the nutrition from the food. So here's an example. You might have a great dinner of, let's say, chicken over einkorn pasta or something and some salad on the side. But if you don't have fats or something that contains these fat soluble vitamins, your body's not going to avail of itself of the very nutrients that are in that food. So you need to combine these foods with healthy fats. And that is so satiating. I didn't realize too, I'm an exercise instructor, so, very slim build and stuff. And I was just eating whatever. And I felt like I was hungry all the time. And my kids were too. And I didn't understand why. But I understand now, as Sally has sometimes put it, we are overfed and undernourished. Like we had the pretzels, we had the apples, but it was like all low fat. I don't know. I guess I didn't try to buy into that, but it seemed like it was the way to eat healthy. And now I know eating healthy means like meat and eggs and raw milk and butter and sourdough. And like, it's the, yes, you can diet is what Sally calls it, because nothing is really off the table. You can even have sweet things, made with honey and yogurt, and natural ice cream has egg yolks in it. Like it's all so good and nourishing. So I think people's satiety level will go up. In other words, how satisfied you feel after a meal. You're likely to snack less, and yes, lose weight, all just from shifting to a more real food diet.
Hey friends, it's Julie. I'm just popping in here real quick to tell you about a very special invitation we have for you. If you have been feeling deeply called to learn more about your feminine identity or to see what feminine power really is, or you're just loving the podcast, then Kaylee and I would love to invite you to join our community, Feminine Alchemist. Inside, we host live monthly women's circles, challenges, and Wheel of the Year celebrations. They are seriously so much fun. We have monthly workshops where we bring in experts to teach on anything from menstruation to mythology. You'll also get access to our library of courses about astrology, intuition techniques, sacred embodiment, and cyclical living. And most importantly, you'll be able to connect with women who are like-hearted and walking the same path as you. So if this sounds exciting to you, join today by clicking the link in the show notes or going to femininealchemist.com. That's alchemist spelled M-Y-S-T. Okay, back to the episode.
So you gave us a little preview. You did
Yes.
number 1, you did number 3. Can we go over the rest of the 11 principles? And then I have some follow-up questions about this, like that people who are skeptical might ask.
Okay, sounds good. I love the skeptic questions. I'm like, bring them on, because I think everyone should test these things for themselves. Like, don't take my word for it. Experiment with it. And this is a problem, I think, in our society sometimes, is we just take things at face value. Oh, I saw this thing on Instagram or TikTok, or this doctor said that, so I guess I'll do it. Well, N equals 1. Forget all the studies. You are the study group. You are the control and the experiment side. So test things out on yourself and see how it goes. For me, I know that my energy went from a kind of a nervous energy, like almost an anxious state, and bone broth and other real food kind of calm me down. Do I still have energy? Yes, but it's not the nervous kind. So yeah, principle number 1 is to avoid refined and denatured foods. Number 2 is to include animal foods. You all, this was Dr. Price's biggest disappointment. He thought he would find people groups that ate exclusively plant-based, but he did not. They all had some kind of animal proteins and fats in their diet, whether it was eggs or fish or, seafood. It was just always something. And they also ate nose to tail, so they didn't waste a thing, which I think is a beautiful way to honor the animal. They prized the organ meats. Those are actually the most nutrient dense. It takes a while to re-educate the palate to like them, but you can start with liverwurst. That's what I've done, and pate. So number 2 is to include animal foods. Dr. Price again was surprised by this. 3 was nutrient density, the idea of looking for the fat soluble activators, these vitamins that really help us, that can be found in the foods I've mentioned, like butter and cheese and eggs and so forth. 4 was they ate some animal food raw and cooked some food. So it was a combination. Some people are big advocates of a raw diet. Like, that's when all the enzymes are alive. Absolutely, go for it. But don't overlook the fact that the indigenous people groups would cook some of their plant food, especially because there are anti-nutrients in plant food, not in animal foods, which is interesting. And so you need to kind of neutralize them by cooking the spinach, cooking the kale. I think the worst thing you could have is probably a kale green smoothie. When I go to little, shops now and then, they're like, do you want a green smoothie? I'm like, no kale, please, because there's oxalates in there, and those are hard to digest and hard on the system. And then again, they get in the way of your absorbing the good stuff. So cook your plant foods and have some raw animal foods. For me, that means raw milk, raw cheese, sometimes raw meat if I feel up to it. And actually, the truth is that kind of is an energy boost. If I have raw liver now and then, I'll shave a little piece of frozen liver off and taste it. And that to me tastes even better than cooked liver. So experiment with that one. I'll just keep rolling real quick. 5 is they included lacto-fermented foods in every diet that we studied. So that means there was always something fermented. Lacto-fermented sounds like it's with milk, but that's just short for the bacteria. But so they had real pickles, not just soaked in vinegar. They were real pickles that had spent some time, letting the anti-nutrients be neutralized and the real nutrients you're looking for become more bioavailable. Like I think sauerkraut and kimchi and foods like this, even kombucha and kefir, were once used as methods to preserve the food, but maybe our ancestors knew this and maybe they didn't. But not only do they preserve the food, but they make the good stuff more available. So that's principle number 5. Number 6 is that they always properly prepared their seeds, nuts, grains, beans, and legumes. It just means there's a reason that when you eat beans, you're always like, okay, a little sorry afterwards. You might feel some gut discomfort, to be polite. But it's because there are, again, these anti-nutrients that need to be neutralized. And so by soaking or sprouting or even fermenting some of these foods, then you take out the stuff that's like phytates and so forth that can kind of lactic acid, I believe, or other things like that that can get in the way of your benefiting the most from those foods. And yeah, so that's great. And I know because my nanny growing up, she would soak the pinto beans before we had, fermented beans, or before we had like refried beans. They were always soaked overnight. That was just the process. And I'd never questioned it. And she probably didn't either, but there was a reason for that tradition. And so 7 was that they all enjoyed a good level of saturated fats. And this is important because we are told to stay away from full fat. For so long it was buy 2% milk or country crock. Now I know that that's a crock because you want the full fat to get the satiation I was talking about, but also because there are elements, micronutrients that are in those fats and even the fat soluble activators I mentioned earlier that do our bodies good. So when we take those out, we are really diminishing the nutrient content of our food. So we want to enjoy saturated fats. And then number 8 is that they consumed foods from land and from sea. They had the right balance of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. I used to just try to remember that this way. I'd be like, okay, omega-6 makes you sick, omega-3 sets you free. But it's not as simple as that because you actually do need both. You want a balance. So make sure to eat both, mariscos is the word in Spanish, but, seafood and then beef and chicken and lamb and things from land as well for that right balance. And then number 9 is that they used unrefined salt liberally. So not talking about the iodized salt that has anti-caking agents in it and stuff that you can get over the table or over the counter. You want to get stuff that has the trace minerals that are really, really good for you that will actually improve your cognitive function. We need salt for so many functions. It can help lift depression. It can take away headaches. Like we're told to lower our sodium. And that's maybe a good idea if you think of the added sodium to a lot of canned foods, because they're not using the right kind of salt. You want to find the best source of quality salt around you. I personally like Redmond's, but there's other brands too that are really excellent sources of unrefined salt. And think about the word salary, by the way. It has its roots in the word salt in Latin because people used to be paid in salt. That's how valuable it is. And then just to wrap it up, the final 2 principles are number 10 was that they often had bone broth. Like I said, they didn't waste the animal. So they would use the bones and extract the collagen, the glycine, the different nutrients that are even found within the bone marrow. So after you have a roast chicken, if this step intimidates you, literally like put it in a crock pot, cover it with water, fill it up with water, add some little acidity or like a apple cider vinegar to help extract, just a splash, help extract the good stuff, and then let it simmer overnight. And before you know it, you have meat stock and then you have bone broth, and it's so nourishing and so good for the joints and for the face. And then number 11, the last one, is that they made preparation for the next generation. So they always made sure to feed pregnant women and babies the best. So in Dr. Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, he talked about going to Peru and other Latin American countries and seeing people from the mountainside come down to the shore and get fish eggs and dry them and then take them back up to the mountain. And he said, why are you doing that? And they said, for healthy babies. So again, I don't know that they knew what the nutritional powerhouse that fish eggs was, roe, but they knew instinctively this was a tradition handed down and that they wanted to give the best to the pregnant mothers and even the fathers to be. In some cultures, the couples will get married in the spring when the cattle were able to graze on the grass and have the most nutrient rich butter. So it's all a cycle here. But these are things we would do well to look back to and include in our modern lives for good health today.
I love that so much. I think it's incredible to hear all the principles. I was like, yeah, just keep going, Hilda. Just keep going. All these like wonderful, nourishing things. I have some challenge questions for you because I'm sure there are some people who this is a challenge for, right? It sounds like, oh, I got to eat yucky stuff. I've got to go really, I'm glad that you said that at the beginning. Like, you don't have to bake your own sourdough all the time or like be doing all these, expensive things all the time to eat this way. But one thing I'm going to challenge, because veganism is very much like we're told that's the way we should be eating, is, there are so many documentaries about like eating vegan is great, eating this. And even like my dad, he'll never listen to this. But my dad, he is now like, he's kind of transformed himself because he read the China studies into this, avid vegan. And of course, for people who don't know, the China studies is a study that was done on a group of people in China who purportedly only eat, plants and plant-based. And I don't know if that's actually legitimately true, because I think some stuff has come out that like about 5 to 10% is still animal protein. I'm not sure. But what would you say to someone like my dad who's like, oh, this is going to cure everything for me eating vegan? What are you talking about? These meats? What about the China studies? Do you have any rebuttal for that?
I actually haven't read the China study, but I have interviewed a lot of regenerative farmers, and I understand that though it's presented in such a way that veganism and going vegan is good for the planet, we need animals. We need cattle, because what do? They actually disturb the soil and with their hooves, and then their manure fertilizes the soil, and then that helps the produce to grow. So you really can't even have your hummus or your carrot salad without animals on the ground, on the fields. And doing all that, by the way, sequesters carbon. When we allow cows to collaborate with us, or when we collaborate with them on the farm, we're actually doing the planet a favor. So that's on one level. On another level, I think we always tend to think as humankind that we can improve on Mother Nature. And Dr. Price literally said, life in all its fullness is Mother Nature obeyed. Life in all its fullness is Mother Nature obeyed. And what he meant by that was, let's see what's happening in nature. And as I said earlier, our ancestors didn't waste anything. So what if we didn't waste the fact that we're animals? What if we didn't actually blame them for climate change? Oh, there's so many cows, their flatulence and burps are causing, these climate change. That's not true. There used to be many more bison roaming the plains back in the day. Why are we blaming these animals now for climate change? I like to say, as Diana Rogers does too, it's not the cow, it's the how. What's really bad for our planet is crowding the animals together in unnatural conditions. Then they tend to get sick. They are mistreated. It's not good for that area because all the manure is kind of mingled together, and then they pump it out to some bay. And like, this is happening near where I live, actually, with chickens. Then the chickens, let's say, get nervous because they're in this tight quarters and they hate it. So they start plucking their feathers. So what do these people do? They chop off their beaks so they can't pluck their feathers. It's the saddest situation I've ever heard of. So vegans, if your dad ever listens to this, let me say, I understand where your heart is. I don't want animals to be mistreated either. But if we collaborate with them and allow the chickens to come and peck in the manure after the cows have been there, they all do their part. The chickens will get rid of the little grubs and things that could be bring bacteria, let's say, and leave just the good stuff for the plants to take advantage of. And then everybody's getting sunlight. And so they're living their best lives. And then when they give their lives and we take them into our bodies, we're getting a good life brought in. We're not getting a bad life. I don't want a cow that has to be dragged through a CAFO to the slaughter. I don't want that energy coming into my body. And that's just on an emotional, kind of psycho and spiritual level. But I think if we pay attention, we'll see that we don't need to come up with an improvement. And let me just give electric cars as a case in point. So people think, oh, I'm going to get an electric car, or at least a hybrid, because that's better for the environment. I'm not using a fossil fuel. And certainly it will be less emissions and things like that. What people don't realize is that to make that car and to get the electric energy that is needed for that car, you've got to burn like tons of fossil fuels. So it's kind of like I'm saying, I'm saving money, I'm recycling, but I'm literally buying all these plastic bottles and they're still going to go in the recycling bin. But who knows how long it's going to take to come back around into something useful. So I think we're kind of getting confused. And I advocate, probably because of my understanding of wise traditions, going back to find simpler ways to collaborate with Mother Nature for good health. So all this, also, I would say with your dad, he needs to pay close attention to how he feels, because sometimes vegans, and again, God bless them, stand by their convictions to the detriment of their own health. And I know because I've interviewed many former vegans and their health goes bad. It starts with the teeth, actually, like Dr. Price said, the teeth tell the tale. And then it begins with kind of joint pains because your bones need animal foods. Your body needs animal foods. And I would suggest, if you're going to have animal foods, find a farmer near you that's doing it right. Stick by your convictions of helping the planet, but know that it's not going to necessarily come to pass by avoiding animal products.
Well, I think his big thing is he thinks there's a lot of health benefits. Like he's not someone who's like cares as much about the planet. Although I know lots of people are concerned about that. I mean,
Yeah.
he cares in his own way. He's just like waking up to a lot of stuff more recently. But for him, he's like, oh, it's going to cure my diabetes. It's going to change all of these things. And I will say he has seen some improvement. And I would say this is always like my rebuttal to it. Well, there are two things. One is, of course you're going to see some good stuff because you cut out all of the processed foods. So obviously you're going to see some improvement in that regard because you cut out all the processed food. And it's not like plants are completely bad for you all the time. Obviously he's getting some nutrients and things like that. But I also, like you, I worry about his muscle mass. I worry about his teeth
Yes.
going bad. He's already had trouble with his teeth. And then my other thing I always think about is like with the Weston A Price Foundation, with all the work and even the work that you and Mary are doing, like going to these places, like that is literally more than 13 people, right? Like 13 different types of people around the world, 13 different cultures, where the China studies is one set of people in one small place.
Oh, that's a really good point. I've asked Sally about this from time to time. I'm saying, does eating ancestrally mean you should eat what your ancestors ate? So I think it might be good for him to think about his own lineage. Chances are his ancestors ate meat. And by the way, do you ever see drawings on a cave of people celebrating the harvest of a carrot? No, they're not like, woo, and there's a drawing of the carrot. No, it's like hunters like this and a little bison running away, because that's what they celebrated is we got the kill. And this isn't to be unkind to animals. It's to say they know their place. We're all part of this natural chain, and we eat them and they strengthen us. And then we take care of, I think actually with farmers, it's a beautiful exchange. The farmer or the rancher is taking care of the animals, and then one day they give their lives. But if they are mistreated, it's a horrible exchange because they've lived a horrible life, and then they end up as a cheap Safeway sale for, a dollar a pound. Like, it's just unfortunate. That's not the kind of food I'm looking for. And so, yeah, my hope is that your dad will also pay attention to his inner cravings, because I have traveled the world. I was inspired by Dr. Price. And so starting in about 2015, I was like, let me go around and see who's left, who's living this kind of ancestral way. And I have found pockets of people around the world, some with Mary Reddick, some on my own. But it was when I was in Australia that one Indigenous Aboriginal woman said to me, in our culture, we have the custom of Dietary, which means deep listening. She goes, and if we practice deep listening and stillness, we might just hear the voice of our ancestors, or that still small voice within us, the voice of God or our conscience or something telling us something. I bet if your dad really listens to himself, he'll know exactly what he needs to eat. I think right now he's outsourced his health. And so that would be a word to anyone listening. Don't outsource your health to me or anybody else. You can listen to people as guides, but you have to do some deep listening to yourself to know what's going to serve you best.
I'll say that the majority of my transformation was a great remembering, 100%. A great remembering. It was like finally somebody said out loud what I knew in my deepest self. Yes. Thank you for saying that.
That's so beautiful. Yes, the remembering. Yeah, I love that. I just feel like what can happen in our circles, as you know, especially now with all the influencers and stuff, is that people think, oh, that person knows, so I'm going to do exactly what they're doing. I think only once did I ever do a post like what I eat in a day, because it's so silly, because I'm very small. I don't need a lot of calories, and maybe what serves me doesn't serve you, Jan, or it doesn't serve you, Julie. So like let's pay attention to our age and stage and our genetic makeup, and listen to ourselves about what we should have. I love meat. I'm not a huge carnivore, but I always hated vegetables growing up. And now I'm like, yay, I was right. I mean, vegetables are fine, but they're not the most nutrient dense pieces. So I'm so happy that I can eat broth and meat and cheese and milk and eggs all to my heart's content. And it's doing my body good. I used to think also, when I wasn't listening to myself, I will do a true confession here. I used to go to the gym, and when I went to the gym, I'd write down my weight, and I would put a frowny face if it was too low, if it was too high, I'm sorry. And even like, I'm even talking like 111 or something. And I put a smile if it was around 105, which is where I wanted to be. Now, again, I am a small person. Okay. But like that was so much judgment on my body. And I did like working out. I still like working out. But now I know, like, I'd rather be nourished and strong than skinny and frail, So I'm really listening to myself. And now I have more of I feel like a gymnast body, but I'm like, I'm okay with this. I actually like it. And I don't want to be one of those skinny old ladies you could push over with a feather or a strong wind, So that's how I'm going for it. So I want people to really listen so that they can know what's best for them and not take society's or even their own original initial flash judgments for what they should do in terms of diet and health.
So the next challenge question I have for you is, what about India? They're all vegetarian, and they've been vegetarian for, I don't know, a couple hundred years, I think. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I can to a degree. I have not been to India, but I've interviewed some people from India. And the woman I interviewed most recently, I believe her name was Sylvia, said that most people in India are not vegetarians, but that is the impression that their country gives. Also, notice this. This is where the term sacred cow comes from, India, right? Because they won't eat the cow. But some say it's because they so prized its milk. So we've overlooked something kind of right under our noses, that maybe it's not that they're against meat. They do like animal products to the degree that they're like, let's not do anything to the cow because we need her milk to survive. So it's kind of interesting, a little paradigm shift there. But she said that actually, even Indian nutritionists say all kinds of things that aren't true, like, oh, well, Indians, we're just naturally small and we really thrive on this diet. And she's like, no, like, and they kind of speak ill of anyone who dares to eat meat. They vilify them and slander them because there's some kind of agenda going on there. I don't really know all the ins and outs, but she told me that there have been mobs that will go to someone's home who's suspected of eating meat, and literally they will lynch them. So this is a perception, but also maybe a cultural moray now that's so ingrained in the Indian people that some people are ashamed to admit that they eat meat. But I think the whole sacred cow thing started because they did so revere the milk that came from the cow. It doesn't mean that they're all against meat, but they thought, let's make the most of this animal that's offering us this life-giving elixir. So it's interesting to consider. But I don't think they're mostly vegetarian. At least that's what Sylvia said, that they weren't. So people might want to check out that Wise Traditions podcast. Just put in Sylvia nutrition in India, because she said there's a lot of propaganda, and she's seen it like in the school systems where they're like, we're not going to have meat because we are meant to be this way. And she's like, wait, that's not right. Or the teachers will say things like, oh, eating meat makes you aggressive, and this kid is acting up because he eats meat. And it's not true. What does it do though? Eating meat makes leaders. Actually, there have been studies showing that children who eat meat 3 times a week in Africa do better in terms of cognitive skills and showing leadership skills than those who have no meat altogether.
That's fascinating. Well, I have lived in India. So that's actually where my husband and I got engaged. We worked at an orphanage for a couple months, and then we traveled around India, and it was beautiful. But I will say, yeah, like meat for us, like in Delhi, meat was not hard to find, but they always do ask the question, right? Like veg, no veg. So are you vegetarian or not? And that was like the big question. And, but wherever we went, like we could always find places, meat was not hard to come by and lots of people were eating it. But I think to Jaye Anne's point, there is this like perception that everybody there is vegetarian and that's what they eat. But I also have found with them, they really prize ghee. So for people who don't know what ghee is butter, but it's been what they call it clarified. So they heat it up really high and they take all the impurities out of it, which can remove things like casein, which some people have trouble with. And they use that every meal. Like they always have dairy at every meal, and they will eat a lot of chicken and lamb. There's a lot of lamb as well in India. At least that was my experience there.
Do you ever wish you could feel instantly grounded? Try putting a piece of the Earth's crust in your body. Yoni eggs have been used by humans for a very long time to improve energetic connection to the Earth, cleanse the chakras, and massage and tone the pelvic floor. I have been using them for a decade now, and every time I put one in, my anxiety just disappears, and it's all thanks to the energetic properties of these crystals. My biggest source of anxiety is a lack of grounding, and when I wear a yoni egg, I feel instantly grounded. And oh yes, there is definitely an improvement in other areas as well. So if you're ever curious, check it out at crunchyparadise.com. That's crunchyparadise.com, and pick up a yoni egg today.
I know this is a passion of yours, so I had to ask you about it, which is cholesterol. Everyone's going to freak out. What, you're eating all these fats and these saturated fats. What about cholesterol? You're going to kill yourself. You're going to have a heart attack. What about that?
Oh my goodness, I hardly know where to begin except to say the healthcare system we have today really is a sick care system. In other words, if you're healthy, you don't need them. And they want to be needed. So they need people to be sick, not dead and not healthy. You got to be in between to be of monetary value to the healthcare system. And so pharmaceutical groups, especially companies, they have products they want to sell, whether pills or injections or what have you. So they're not really looking to preserve your health because that doesn't do them any good. They're looking to make money. So the whole cholesterol thing, first of all, it starts with a very faulty premise. So I believe it began when Ancel Keys was a famous researcher in the 1970s, said that he had found a correlation between eating a cholesterol-rich or a fat-heavy diet and heart disease. But he did a study, I think it was called the 7-country study, where he cherry-picked his data to come to the conclusion that he wanted. And at that time, or shortly before, I think Truman, one of the presidents, had a heart attack. And so everyone was scared. So then the government started saying, okay, this guy found this study. There's a correlation here. So we need people to start eating less fat. So the American people dutifully obeyed this dictum or this idea, this guideline to start eating less fat. But do you know that obesity and heart attacks continue to rise to this day? These things have continued to rise. So the idea of lowering the cholesterol that we ingest to lower the cholesterol in our body, that's a faulty premise to begin with. And then the second thing is, cholesterol is often blamed for causing heart attacks when actually the jury is out about what's causing heart attacks. Some people say when we blame cholesterol for the heart attack, it's like blaming firemen for the fire. The firefighters show up to help, but you don't say, well, they started the fire. So when doctors say, oh my gosh, you have 3 major arteries blocked, we've got to do open heart surgery and, you better start taking statins, they're responding to the cholesterol that's there, but the cholesterol was there to help. What started the fire? They still haven't figured it out. Some actually say it's sugar, possibly. Some say it's stress, but I don't think it was cholesterol. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I just interviewed one, Dr. Jack Wolfson, who's a cardiologist, and he thinks it's stress. He also thinks that mold and even microplastics are affecting our hearts. So why, oh, why are they telling us we all need to get on cholesterol lowering drugs? Even a friend of mine in his 30s, I'll never forget. He's like, oh, Hilda, I'm losing my mind. It must be all the drugs I did in my 20s. But I found out he was on statins, and statins affect your cognitive ability. They also can cause joint pain. There are lots of side effects, but they've actually lowered the bar. They suggest that you have high cholesterol when you're over, I think it's between 150 and 199. They say that's high cholesterol, but it used to be that high cholesterol was over 200, let's say. So do you see they've lowered the bar so more people qualify to be on statins, including children? And I think this is a crime. I think because I've interviewed enough people, including Sally Fallon Morell, the president of the Weston A Price Foundation. She says that as you age, you need more cholesterol. And I know my mom, may she rest in peace. She did pass away at 83, but it wasn't from a heart attack. But she had high cholesterol. And I was like, Mom, please don't get on statins, because it's just like de rigueur. When you reach a certain age, they start shoving you with, blood pressure medications. And then it's like some statins to lower cholesterol. And our seniors have become a dumping ground for pharmaceuticals. So I would say people, again, should do their own research, but I personally would rather hold on to my cholesterol, and I invite it to be a part of my life because it actually helps with cognitive function, but also I think for a healthy heart and other functions, hormonal functions, we need cholesterol. It's actually a nutrient in the body. It is a nutrient / hormone that is needed. And I did a 3-part series on the Wise Traditions podcast about this, but that kind of sums it up. I think there are false goals and faulty premises for our understanding of cholesterol today.
Yeah, if you want more information about that, definitely listen to that 3-part series, because Hilda did an excellent justice in like 2 minutes on that. But yeah, I'm sure it could talk a whole podcast just on cholesterol and impact to the heart. Beautiful. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, and of course, now you're bringing to mind one of the answers that someone else said, but I had Dr. Kate Shanahan on the show. She was one of the 3 that I interviewed on cholesterol. And I'll never forget, because she said, like, a lot of people will now choose like a canola oil or a sunflower or safflower oil or a soybean oil to cook in because they've been told that those are heart healthy. She said, Hilda, those are oxidative stress in a bottle. They are so rancid. They are colorized. They are deodorized. They're ultra processed. Sally even calls it the oiling of America. And that is really affecting not only our joints, but our heart. So it's the opposite of what you think. Oftentimes, the conventional wisdom is to be looked at with a very skeptical eye.
Yeah. Thank you. It's not wisdom at all, honestly.
Right.
It's newfangled ideas.
Exactly. But just to be clear, I'm not a Luddite. I'm like, oh no, I'm never going to have a cell phone. Like, I have an iPhone 15, maybe that's outdated already. But, I feel like tech has its place, and I am grateful for modern science to a degree, but I think some of it has become very settled. Remember, they even said during 2020, the science is settled. It's like, how could it be settled? Shouldn't we still be asking questions? Real science invites debate and questions and looks for solutions. But by the way, that reminds me, all these campaigns for like search for the cure, they're never going to find the cure, because if they find the cure, they're out of business. So it's really a propaganda machine. Some of the companies, not all of them, I'm sure there are well-intended people in some of these groups, but a lot of them are just looking for financial gain on their own part, and they're not looking out for your health. You do need to take your health into your own hands. And that's one of the messages I put out as, Holistic Hilda. I love that moniker because it makes my name easier than Hilda Labrada Gore, but also because health is so multifaceted. But I have learned on my travels that food is foundational, but it's also important to get plenty of sunshine and sleep. And even I call it shivers, like experiencing the environment. I have these 6 ancestral secrets that I point to because it makes me personally so happy. And I'm in my 60s now, y'all, and I feel like I'm in my 40s. Like, I feel so freaking good. And I know it's because I'm living more ancestrally. Do I still use tech? Like I said, absolutely. Will I go get an x-ray if I broke something? Probably, but I, for the most part, I'm looking to avoid hospitals and take my health into my own hands.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. Sorry, Jaye Anne, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Just kind of with the cholesterol conversation, and I don't want to get too crazy, but at the same time that people were being told you've got to get on these statin drugs, you got to do the medical side, at the same time the foods were dramatically changing as well from the 70s till now, and that was slightly strategic
in growing the food business too, the food industry. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it grew the food industry and it grew our waistlines. It's so unfortunate. Scientists learned to concoct in a lab imitation foods, pseudo foods, like I said earlier. There is a book called The Dorito Effect, in which they outline exactly how they are able to imitate the real foods out there and then making these pseudo foods hyper palatable. So there is a reason you can't just eat one. I think Lay's used to have that campaign, you can't just eat one. It's because it's so good. And your body thinks, wow, like let's say these flaming hot Cheetos like have a cheesy taste. So there must be cheese in there. Keep going, keep eating it, because certainly the cheese is going to come. Before you know it, you've eaten the whole bag and the cheese never came and your body was craving it. Your mouth was finding it palatable, but your gut and the rest of you will not find it nutritious in any way, shape, or form. So, yes, as you said, it was intentional. I think it was when cigarettes, they found out they were linked to cancer, or at least they had to start revealing that it was linked to cancer, that the head of Philip Morris, I believe, and some other cigarette companies shifted over to the food industry. And they figured out a way to make the foods just as addictive as cigarettes. And so this is why people today really do have a hard time resisting it, because once your palate is accustomed to these hyperpalatable foods, the other real foods at first may pale in comparison to your palate. But that's why I suggest like get your kids started early on liverwurst, on cheese, on real foods so they'll crave it. And I know I started when my kids were probably, I don't know, let's say like 13, 12, 10 and 9. I had them really close together. I had like 4 kids in 5 years. But anyway, I started then. And even then I was able to impact them. Now, it didn't mean they didn't go out for birthday parties and had birthday cake or go somewhere out to eat. But after a while, they started saying to me, Mom, that burger I had out there tasted like dog food. Like they were just like, it's not the same thing, because I had started accustoming their palates to the real food. And this was so rewarding for me. And you guys might already know this, but people that work for like intelligence agencies and they're trying to sleuth out like people who make counterfeit money and counterfeit bills, they don't spend their time studying the counterfeit bills. They study the real bills. So then they can identify the counterfeit. And I think that's exactly what we can do as parents with our families is feed them the real food. They'll see how they feel. They'll see how it tastes. And then when they go out and about, they'll know the difference. And as they get older, they'll make the right choices.
Yeah, I think as a witness to what you said too. So my husband went to school for marketing, and one of the customers they had to help was Doritos. And so he toured the Dorito factory, and they told him, we purposefully, like just straight up, like this is not for people who are like, this is a conspiracy or like something crazy. They told him straight to his face. They said, yeah, we make the powder so fine on the Doritos that it tricks your body into feeling like it hasn't eaten anything, so that your body keeps eating, keeps eating, keeps eating. You can never be satiated. He talked to the food scientists and they said, yeah, we do this on purpose. We know exactly what we're doing when we're doing this. So it's not like this is like, just a game or some conspiracy. It's just the real thing is like, it's just about money, right? Like the more people consume Doritos, the more money that they will make. The more that you eat Doritos, the more you get used to them, the more you want them more, right? And they know it's addictive. And they're okay with that, and we
Yeah.
can become so okay with the idea that it is addictive. And that's why I think I get so much pushback, and you will, just for people out there, like as you're trying to shift your diet, you don't have to do it all at once. It's very difficult, but I will get so much pushback on like, how can you eat organ meats, or how can you do this? Like, I could never do that. And aren't you spending so much time preparing all these things and it doesn't even taste good? But after you do it, for me, to be 100% honest with people, for me, it took about a year. It took about a year to really get my palate to shift over to now. And yes, it is really easy. Like if you get back on the train of eating processed foods, it's really easy to like get back into that habit. And so you do have to be careful. Not that you can't have processed foods once in a while. Like I still, like my niece just baked a cake and I had some of the cake, I couldn't eat a whole slice because it was too much for me, which will be the result. Like you'll start eating things, you'll be like, oh, this is too much for me. And your body will remember like, oh, this is not what I actually want to eat. And that can be so, so helpful. But just so people know, like, you can do this, and there are sneaky ways you can get organ meats. Like, you don't have to just like eat organ meats straight. Like, you can put them in different things to hide them. Like, there's lots of ways to do this. But I wondered, Hilda, do you have any tips for people who are trying to change their diets?
Yes, absolutely. So, you might already know this, but Force of Nature Meats sells ground beef blends. So it's ground beef with some of the organ meats mixed in. And I can also get a ground beef blend from my local farmer. So I love to point people to Farm Match. It's one of my favorite companies that I join hands with. There's a little link on my website so you can get 15% off your first order, but not to be a plug. But I just want to say they are like Tinder for farms. I just love them so much. So you go in there, you say what you want. Like, I want more, let's say, fresh carrots, or I want raw milk, or eggs, or meat, or pork chops, whatever it is. They'll tell you what farms deliver in your area, and some will deliver straight to your door, or if they're involved in local farmers markets, whatever. So I found an Amish farm in Pennsylvania that's not far from where I'm at, and they mix the organs in. So our burgers, our meatballs, anything that we make with that ground beef has already got the organ meats in it. That is so easy. Then the other thing, like I said, for me, liverwurst to me is like a gateway entryway into eating organ meats. As a kid, I wanted liverwurst sandwiches. I felt so weird at school, but I really did. I didn't know. Now I know I was craving nutrients, but back then I just thought I was strange. But liverwurst often has dairy and a little bit of other things in it. So it's got some spices. So it's really palatable, I think. And you just can cut it in little round slices and make like a sandwich with mustard and onion, and it's delicious. So, and this is the thing I would say too. For me, I just did these simple swaps. I kind of like up leveled my food. So we would still have, like, for dinner one night, we might have BLTs, but it would be on sourdough bread. It would be on bacon that was like nitrite and nitrate free or whatever, no sugar. And then we would have on the side like a smoothie that we made with ice and raw milk and honey and maybe a little vanilla extract. It was like amazing. And we would have this every Wednesday. It was like our go-to Wednesday night dinner. And so my kids didn't feel like, oh, we're being deprived, we're eating healthy. It's absolutely delicious when you eat this Wise Traditions way, in my opinion. Like, I used to not care about eating, and now I love it because I know how nourishing it is, but it also tastes good. And I think my family was really glad when I made a switch too.
One of my favorite things to do is take liver and just blend it with bacon and onions, and I make like a sausage out of it. And I can get even the toughest liver hater to eat because it just tastes like bacon.
That's so yummy.
So what is some of the things that you love to talk about on your podcast, other than just food, which I'm sure you talk about that a lot?
Yeah, there are so many topics we touch on. The foundation is big on food, farming, and the healing arts. So we talk about some of the regenerative practices I alluded to earlier, but we also talk about everything from biofield tuning with a tuning fork to how to spot propaganda out there in the medical system to, oh, I don't even know, even like our environment, the power of peanuts and copper and things that we've been told are no good. Like, actually, yes, peanuts, for example, and peanut butter, we're told, oh, it has mycotoxins, and so we better avoid it. But I interviewed this guy, Matt Rusky, who's done a deep dive on it. And he's like, actually, like, I feel better than ever eating peanut butter. And so maybe we've been sold a bill of goods. So I say, examine everything carefully and learn what you can. And then, like you all know, I've also done like my own travels because I thought, let me see what's going on out in the world, what I can learn still. So I have little courses and things on my website where I try to point people to incorporating ancestral secrets for good health and better energy and vitality. And I'm not saying my course will reverse people's autoimmune conditions, but it really can move the needle for a new level of well-being. Like one woman said, yeah, my husband's brain fog went away. I'm sleeping through the night, all these things by getting more. There's 6 secrets that I'll start with S. So it's like sunshine, sleep, shivers, sustenance, strength, and spirit, and how we can incorporate these practices into our lives and how they're backed by science too. So I'm having fun doing all that stuff, making content for my YouTube channel, for Instagram, and then also the podcast, which is really fun. But just to be clear, it's not a solo cast. So it's not me. I'm always interviewing these brilliant, brilliant guests. Everyone from Kelly Brogan to Bruce Lipton to Zach Bush to Luke Story to Joel Salatin. It's amazing. And Julie, of course.
Oh, that's so kind of you. Yes, the podcast is amazing. And also, Hilda's courses are amazing. Her travels are amazing. You can learn so much from her Instagram. And I always do. Like, when I see her videos, I love to just learn from them. But is there anything you want to point out? I know you talked about your course, but is there anything else you want to point out about what you do or that you're really excited about right now?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, after people take the 6-week course, I often invite them to join my community, but you don't have to take the course to join the community. But the truth is, and maybe you've already noticed this, both of you, Julie and Jaye Anne, but I'm like a cheerleader. And so I want to keep cheering people on and answering their practical questions and being there for them. But I was like, I can't do this one-on-one, but I could do it with a community. So I have a community I call the Holistic Hub. And so there I just invite people to join and ask me their questions. And I do a once a month live. And I also have actually a solo private podcast where I share my thoughts and conclusions from different interviews I've done and different experiences. And speaking of experiences, this summer I'm going to Colombia, South America, and I'm going there to be with some indigenous people. I don't know if you've heard of them, the Kogi people, but I was blown away when I got this opportunity. So to make a long story short, sometimes you just feel like God is steering you in a certain direction. So New Year's Eve, a friend lent me a book about the wisdom of the Kogi people. And I'm like, who are the Kogi people? I don't know who these people are. They are people that believe that they live at the end of the world. It's in the Sierra Nevada in Colombia, South America. And they see themselves as the older brother, and they see modern man or humanity as the younger brother. And they feel a responsibility to help make the world a better place for the younger brother, but also to share their wisdom with him. And so I'm reading this book about them and I'm like, okay, well, I'm done with that. The next thing I know, someone who works with the Kogi tribe or one of the Kogi tribes was like, Hilda, do you want to come down and be with the Kogi people? I was like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, this is amazing. It's always eye-opening for me to travel because I still have a lot of research to do about their practices, but I also kind of like learning person to person. And so I can't wait to meet them and see how they interact with their environment. What can I learn about their wisdom? In what ways has our mind as modern day people gotten polluted by all the propaganda and all the stuff around us? These people are super isolated. I've heard that you've got to take like a plane to, let's say, Bogota, and then you take like a little bus over to this certain area. And after a while, you just have to walk to find these people at the end of the world. Maybe they really are at the end of the world. I'm not sure, but I'm very excited. I will be doing that in June around the solstice. So I feel very touched that they reached out to me. And I know that they don't just reach out to anybody. So I feel very honored, actually, that they think I would be a worthy recipient of the wisdom they're going to impart to me. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you're doing it around the solstice too. We often talk about the solstices and the equinoxes and, the ancient traditions of moving with the wheel of the year, that the year is a wheel and that, we are just turning with it. So is there anything, and I don't want to, if Jaye Anne has any more questions, I want to make room for that too, but is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with, any wisdom that you want to impart at the end of this? Because we could talk forever. I know. I have so many more questions.
We could. And so, yeah, another time we may. Both of us are leaving town. I think tomorrow we were discussing offline. But I think the thing I would share is this. From my travels around the world, I still have found healthy indigenous people, and they all have some kind of spiritual practice. So I'm a Christian, and for me, that is, prayer, reading the Bible. It looks differently in different parts of the world, but there is a sense that there's something bigger at play here. We're more than flesh and bones. And I just really love that. And I think, what good is it to have the best steak in front of you, or for your dad, the best Caesar salad or whatever, maybe without the cheese and the anchovies. But anyway, you have the best food, but your spirit is downcast or depressed or unhappy. Like, what good is it? So I always say, make choices and think of life in terms of what makes your soul shine, what lifts your heart up. Play music. Yes, pray. Find things that lift you up. Engage with community. These things are just as critical as the food that you put into your body, because our diet is not just what we take in with our mouths and what comes through our digestive tract. It really is all that we consume. So make sure you have things that make your soul shine.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Hilda. And if you can find her at the Wise Traditions podcast. And then what's your website?
And holistichilda.com. And for the podcast, it's westonaprice.org. You can find the 11 principles. You can ask for a free info pack, and they'll send you a brochure that includes the pictures that Dr. Price took. It's so fascinating, of the healthy indigenous people untouched by modern lifestyles and diets, and then those who've changed their diet, because you can see the difference in their face. The faces become more narrow as the diet changes. It's fascinating stuff. We just touched the tip of the holistic iceberg here, but it's been a pleasure.
Thanks again. All right, everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, you guys.
Hey, it's Jaye Anne again. This episode is a little bit longer for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm very excited to let you guys know that this episode is being featured on podcastthon, which is basically a lot of podcasters getting together and talking about a nonprofit organization that they are passionate about. And of course, we chose Weston A Price Foundation because the Weston A Price Foundation supports people in being fully healthy and fully in the rhythms of nature, right? That's what this entire episode was about. And then, of course, we're so passionate about it that we could not stop talking about it, me and Julie. And so we were like, hey, let's just hit record. And we're going to just talk about all of the things that have been really important and valuable to us as we have gone on these food journeys over the years. And why a food journey and emotional health journey and a return to the feminine are so integral to each other. So you get like some extra bonus content by still listening after the interview is over. I think there's like 20 some minutes of me and Julie just talking constantly about this topic because it's something we're passionate about. And, you know, there's like 75,000 other podcasts that talk about this very topic, which is beautiful. And I love that. And we could talk like multiple episodes on this thing. But you get to see a little insight into what our journeys were like, how we got into it, and some takeaways and things that we've learned on how to make eating real food more plausible and not feel like this like huge task. So I hope you enjoy it. If you're interested in the remainder of podcastthon, because there's tons and tons of organizations that people are supporting through this collaboration, go to podcastthon.org, and that's where you can see it. And then we'll have a link in the show notes. So enjoy our ramblings. All right, it's Jaye Anne and Julie back again to recap on this episode because we're both so passionate about real food, about Weston A Price Foundation, and everything that Hilda talked about just kind of incited so many stories for us that we wanted to share with you. Like, this isn't just somebody like standing on a soapbox, like telling you what they think. Like she said, like, experiment for yourself, but also we want you to see like real time, like this is stuff that changed both of our lives in reality. Like I don't think I would be here without the Weston A Price Foundation. Not because of like I just really don't. I don't think I would have made it. You know, through parenting.
Totally. And we would have kept talking with Hilda longer, but like she said, she literally has to run and like catch a plane right now. So she was super kind to chat with us as long as she did. But we both, we're just passionate about this. This foundation is important. And just food for women and for the feminine is so important.
Yes.
That receiving piece. We don't often think about the body, but everything that happens in the body is so important to the feminine. So Jaye Anne was telling me a story about her aunt who worked in the food industry. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah, my aunt worked for a very well-known food maker. And she was a food scientist. So she worked there for like a decade. And she said that she would do when they did product testing. I don't think she was involved in the product testing. I don't remember which part she was in, but when they did product testing, they would bring in children, and whichever ones the children became immediately addicted to, that's the one that would go to market. Whichever ones the kids couldn't get enough of, that's the one they would sell. And that to me, first of all, is like
terrifying, right? We're like, okay, we're having cigarette companies create food, and we're trying. So now they have an even younger runway to addiction, right? And second of all, it's it's appeasing and appealing to that part of us that is that baser instinct, right? That inner child that we are. You don't lose your child when you become an adult, when you grow up. So it just to me is like, I don't know, insidious as hell.
Totally. It totally is. And it's very unapologetic, you know. We
Yeah.
try to hide it or like say no, but it's very, very unapologetic. They know exactly what they're doing. Like I said, the Doritos guy just told my husband straight to his face, like, yeah, we do this so it's as addictive as possible. That is the point to it. And it really does. I mean, who doesn't? You know, think about like your childhood now, especially as those, you know, growing up 70s, 80s, 90s, early O's. Think about how much food encapsulated your life, like how many sugary packaged things like zebra cakes that you like took to school with you, right? Or fruit roll-ups or gushers or whatever it was that like that was a treat that was important to you. And we still have so many emotions tied to that. And we don't realize that, you know, our physical state really does affect our mental and emotional state as well as our spiritual state. And I know so many people, you know, and there's a very logical side to this. Like, think about if you're in chronic pain, it's really hard to like get spiritual and work through your emotions. You're like, no, I'm in chronic pain right now. This is the only emotion that I have. You know, I can't take care of anybody else or myself because I'm in chronic pain. And that's why this is just so important. And real food is so important because our bodies, right? Just like Weston A Price said, like the teeth tell the tale, our bodies keep the score, right? And our bodies, if we are having these like addictive modes, and so many of these foods are really connected to our childhood and our childhood wounds and how we grew up, and our perception of ourselves was so tied to this food and to our worth. And so I think it's so important to talk about this in ways we can let go of some of those addictions and just know like it's not your fault. You know,
Yeah.
it's not your fault. You were raised in this environment where, you know, food, that's all we had. And it's not really your parent. You can blame your parents. It's not really your parents' fault either. They didn't know, you know, this kind of advertising is just so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you turn. And they thought like by giving you low fat, high sugar stuff, they were helping you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, the spiritual journey and the emotional journey was hand in hand with the food. As I changed my food, I could start to change my emotions. And as I changed my emotions, I could start to be okay with letting go of those foods that I thought were like either good for me or those beliefs, right? Like fat is bad, right? One of my biggest transformation, like phrases that like reframed everything was I can change, I can exchange fat for sugar. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, because it was like, oh, you can't have fat, but you should feel guilty about having sugar, but you can have sugar. Once I was like, I'm just going to stop bothering with sugar and accept and like invite the fats into my body, it like it was such a relief. It was such a relief. And the fat is like such an important part of the Weston A Price Foundation. And just ask any of my family members who can be like, oh, Jaye Anne and her fat, whatever. But it was real. And because I was so depleted already, there's so much fat in the brain. Like the brain needs fat. Every cell in our body is made up of lipids. And when we start eating these oils that have like wiggly tails and not saturated fat, then we're implanting wiggly tails, right? Like soft cells. We're creating weaker cells when we are regenerating. So it shifted my life. Like my skin became more taut. Everything became like I lost all this weight, right? But yeah, there's like a huge, so much to say about this. It's like insane. But I want you to understand, like when we are doing emotional processing, we're changing our brains and we're creating new neural pathways. When we create new neural pathways, we need fat to support that. We need nutrients to support that. Every 7 years, we replace every bone in our body. We need the nutrients to support that. So just get it done. Get it done.
I love it. I love that we're so passionate. I love this piece because, before we worked together, before Jaye Anne and I worked together and I was doing more of my legal work still, part of my job was to sit in on FDA meetings. Like that's what I used to do, is sit in on government meetings. And you don't know how many times, like we're talking about, so if someone is on welfare per se, right? Like you're on Medicaid or whatever you need, you can only get, or food stamps is what I mean. When you're on food stamps, there's only certain kinds of foods you can buy with those food stamps. And I would sit in meetings and listen to, food industry after food industry come through and say, you can't take soda off of these food stamps. They need to buy soda. They need to be buying chocolate milk. They need to be buying all these packaged foods. Wow. Real whole food, like when someone would come in and say, we want them to be able to get meats and greens and real butter and things like that, that would always be voted down in favor of the foods that were more highly processed. Why? Because of the money factor. It was cheaper. It was cheaper for the government. That's always what won out, right? Like it was cheaper for the government if we kept doing these packaged foods than supporting real food and real farms. And that's like a huge systemic problem that we have just nationwide. And so just knowing, that's why what Jaye Anne is saying is so important, because we have spent so much time divorcing our mental state and our emotional state and our spiritual state from our body. We've spent so much time being like, the body is awful, it's icky, it's carnal, it's sensual, it's devilish. Like we say all these things about our body, when no, your body is actually the gateway to, just like Jaye Anne said, your healing, your spiritual enlightenment, everything that you need. And that's why this topic is just so important, exactly what she said. And that's why it's important to take our health into our own hands. And that's why, if you noticed on the podcast, we're interviewing some more people who deal with health. Like we have Liz and coming on. She talked a lot about raw milk and, as parents, how do we teach our children to eat real food? Because this matters for your healing and it matters for your femininity. And this is not to, I just want to make this really clear. Like, as someone who is overweight myself, this is not about like your body shape or size or like saying that you're bad for, again, this is not your fault. Like it is not about saying you're bad for eating processed foods. Every single human in the US and most of the world has eaten processed foods and eats processed foods on a daily basis. Like this is the way it works, but all we're doing is trying to encourage you to connect your body, mind, and spirit by being more mindful about the food that you put into your body to allow your body to be able to heal.
Yes. Yes. I do want to touch something coming back to food stamps. I've been on food stamps before, and I have bought food from the farmer's market on food stamps before. And I think one of the things that tends to come up when we start talking about real food is expense. And so let's jump into that for a second. Like the number one thing that I experienced, and I volunteered for WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. WIC is the one I think that Julie's really talking about, because WIC, it has like, you have to get beans, you have to get cereal, you get a gallon of milk. Like there's specific things on your coupon that you're allowed to have. But food stamps is a little bit more free form. You just can't get things like diapers or supplements on food stamps. And so I've seen people who are on food stamps and WIC, and they just are eating real food, and they just have to go and get free food. But they're getting like Pop-Tarts, they're getting like sugary cereals. And so this is like one of those ways where it's like, here, and the whole point of WIC was to like make things better for children, so that way we'd have healthier people, but it is the opposite. But it's literally like Pop-Tarts and food. And then it just drives me nuts that WIC is doing the opposite of what it needs to do. But I always got stuff from the farmer's market when, because they all tend to have SNAP benefits. And I was able to get stuff from like Whole Foods. You just can't get prepared foods. So there are options for people who are on food stamps. It's just really, it seems jarring when you look at the price of meat in the grocery store versus the price of meat at the farmer's market. And it's hard to like integrate that. And I think that is something we also could have asked Hilda about, but again, we had so much to talk about. So what are some ways that you've kind of either integrated that mentally or found ways around it? Julie?
Yeah, I think the big thing about this, yeah, and Jaye Anne, you're totally right. This is affecting kids a lot because of programs like WIC and also school lunches and what's allowed in school lunches. That is a huge, huge thing. And it's interesting to think about what Hilda said about, how they prized feeding their young so much better and giving them the best, because I think right now it's reversed, right? We give them the worst stuff. And even me, sometimes I'll be like, you can have the chocolate, you can handle it, like you're young, you can handle it. But we've kind of done this to our kids. But for anyone, so everyone knows, just like Jaye Anne, right? I've had to be on government assistance before. I have been in a place and still in a financially, tenuous position. And it's really hard to spend money on food when you're in that position. I totally understand. One thing I want to say, like for, I guess, a hack or whatever, is, your farmer actually might sell it to you cheaper, believe it or not, than the grocery store. And Hilda mentioned Farm Match. Farm Match is a great way to find a farmer, because most people are like, I have no idea how I could get in touch with a farmer. I have zero idea how I could get. And so it's just Farm Match, like matching a farm to you, right? Like farmmatch.com. You type in your zip code, it'll show you the farmers. You can call them up, you can ask them about their practices, and oftentimes they'll sell it to you much cheaper than they sell it to the store. So that's one hack. And even the Weston A Price Foundation, they have chapters, and those chapters actually, they connect with farmers as well, and they help you find the best farmers in your local area. So you can look up Weston A Price Foundation and find your local chapter, and your local chapter head will be able to help you with this information also. Another hack is you don't have to do everything right away. Like you can buy regular stuff in the grocery store and just instead of opting for the beans that have canola oil in them, just like read the label and opt for the beans that are just beans in the can. You can say, okay, I am just going to buy, I don't have to buy organic. I'm just going to buy the regular vegetables right now and try that. And yeah, like wild caught is always going to be better for you. But if you need to start with the farm stuff, start with the farm to salmon, whatever it is, but start small and just switching to food that's real food is good enough for now. Like let it be good enough and just switching one thing. And also you can remake old meals that you love. You can just replace them with whole food ingredients, right? Like you can still do tacos and everything that you want. Just switch out the beans, right? For the healthier bean that you want to use, or just switch out the meat for something that doesn't have oil in it already, or, just chop up your own, Hilda talked about that, but it's very easy. And you can find websites all over the internet that will teach you how to do this, that will help you replace things. One of my favorites is called Downshiftology, like a Downshiftology. I love her. I love her stuff. It's tasty. It's delicious. It's real food all the way. You can find anything that you need there. But just do it simply. It doesn't have to be all at once. Do you have thoughts about this, Jaye Anne?
Yeah, I just remember I had 2 young kids at home. I couldn't work because my kids were so close together, and I just was reading about the value of real eggs, of pastured eggs growing on actively growing grass, and the color difference, and they just seemed like magical eggs. And there was like some window, like some glass window between me and these eggs, and I was like, I want those eggs so bad. $5 a dozen sounds crazy, which today's prices, that's like super normal right now, or even cheap compared to conventional. And conventional at the time was probably like $1.50, $1.99, right? This was like 10, 20, not 20, 12 maybe years ago. And I was like, oh, but these eggs, they sound amazing. And I like did the math and I put it in a Excel spreadsheet. And I was like, if I buy 2 dozen eggs a week and I spend $6 more a week on eggs, is that really going to put me in the poorhouse? Like, is that really going to make a problem? And I just had to go and trust that that was definitely the next step for me. And it started with eggs. It started with getting on a wait list that I was on for 2 years for raw milk.
because it had to be sold through a cow share. It's also started with me going to my farmer's market and talking to every single one of the farmers who were there, asking them about their practices. And I'm very fortunate to live in an area where there's like tons of farmers around, and many of them drive like 2 hours each way to the farmers market. So, but I would go and talk to them about their practices. I would talk to them like, what are the things that they do and what's important. And one of the coolest things was I was walking around the farmer's market, and there was a beef farmer, and I think happily of this man to this day. There's a beef farmer there. He had a book written by Joel Salatin just sitting on his table, and it was like a homing beacon. And I was like, okay, this is my guy, So I was like, okay, I'm going here. It doesn't matter. And so I would just talk like, what's going on in the farm? How are things going in the farm? What are the cows doing? I would get to know things about his kids, there are things about his family. There would be his favorite hauler would come and just hang out sometimes, and we'd just talk. And my mom says like watching me at the farmer's market was like amazing, because like on the bell of the ball, like everybody's like, Jaye Anne, and they would like hug me and stuff. And I moved far away from that market, so I haven't been in a while. But it starts with those little steps, and then you start to see like how you can fit it into your budget. You don't like Julie said, you don't have to like do a total overhaul. You do not. You don't have to be like, I'm gonna rip all this stuff out. That's not sustainable for anybody. But little incremental things of like, I'm no longer buying canola oil. Okay, what do I replace that with? Somebody asked me, how do I bake a cake without canola oil? And I had to like think for a minute, because I hadn't baked a cake in a while. And also because I was like, what do you use? It took me 2 weeks, and it was butter. Hello, use butter. But my brain was like, coconut oil? No, that would taste weird. And maybe some olive oil, that would also taste good. I was like, it took me a really long time to go, don't just dump something, like melt some butter, it'll be delicious. Add 20%, but melt some butter.
I mean, coconut oil, I bake with coconut oil all the time, especially for cakes. It's delightful. It like adds this lovely aroma. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's hard to, there's always a substitute for everything. Sorry, keep going.
Oh yeah, there is. So one of my other favorite things to do, because then there's the palatable stuff, right? Grass-fed beef always tastes different. You have to get used to grass-fed beef flavor. But I will say, when I switched to grass-fed beef and I got used to the flavor, and it took me about 6 months or so, I ate less than when I had conventionally raised, because my body was seeking the nutrients. And that was true for everything. I ate less chicken. I ate less, and we were fine. It wasn't like we were hungry at all. It was just that like we weren't seeking additional nutrients that wasn't in the first serving. We didn't need seconds. The same thing was true for chicken. The chicken tastes a little bit different. It still tastes like chicken. Beef, grass-fed beef tastes like almost something else, like gamey. But grass-fed chicken or pastured chicken just tastes more chickeny. It tastes more chickeny. And then I take all the bones and I stick it in a freezer bag, and I stick it in my freezer. And when that bag, a gallon-sized bag, is full, and my kids will be like, oh, it's a bone bag. Everybody hates the bone. Everybody loves it anyways, though, because it's delicious when you make the broth. And I stick it in my freezer, and then I dump it into my crock pot. Like, just like Hilda said, you don't have to be a trad wife in order to make this work. You just put some systems in place that you didn't have in place before, and you can make it really easy. But I will say, and I know Julie's going to have so many things to say, so I'm going to just get this last bit in here. I will say that, just like what Julie said, like my palate changed so dramatically that I eventually hated Oreos. Oreos, which I could eat a sleeve of in a sitting and accidentally out of nowhere go, oh, whoops, I ate the whole box. I took one bite of an Oreo after probably 6 months to a year of eating this way, and I was like, this has no flavor. It had no flavor. So it can happen, and it can happen, and it can happen. And your neurons change, your taste buds change, everything changes, and it's okay. And you find even more richness and more flavor in the traditionally raised foods, and because it's like so good.
So good. Oh, one more thing I like to do that's super weird is she talked about like a little bit of grated liver. She'll take frozen liver and grate it and like eat it raw. And I used to put lamb's liver, so pre-frozen, and that's important if you read the book. It's important that it's been frozen. Pre-frozen lamb's liver in a smoothie with strawberries and milk, because it would be pink and that'd be weird. But it's like better than coffee, guys. It's like, zow! Don't do it with chicken liver. I made that mistake once. I'll never do it again.
Lamb liver. That's fascinating. I love that.
It doesn't have that taste, that gross taste that beef liver has. So tell me more about your things.
No, I think you pointed out all really, really great things. And yeah, you can do this piece by piece. I actually, just so everyone knows, like, and people who listen to this who knew me before probably were like, Julie, you used to be vegan. And I was. I did the vegan thing for like almost a year, 9 months to a year. I was like super into it because I had like read these books and like watched, these documentaries, and I was like so into it. So going back and relearning, right? Because you may be coming from a framework. Here's the thing. I like, once you go down the rabbit hole, as we're talking, once you start this heroine's journey and go down that rabbit hole, you can try all the different kinds of diets. I have tried every single kind of diet. Like, I have been vegan, I've been vegetarian, I have done keto diet. I haven't done a full carnivore yet. Maybe that's my next step. I'm just like missing going the carnivore. But I've done all the things before. I did what's called the Walls protocol, which actually is quite really, really great. It's very Weston A Price-esque. But the reason I keep coming back to Weston A Price for myself is because it makes the most sense in so many ways, because it's based off of our traditional cultures, how our ancestors ate. And that's the way that we're supposed to eat. And many of these diets have different purposes. And I do think food is medicine, and that different diets can have a different purpose for a period of time and can be medicine for a period of time, depending on like your specific ailment or what you need. But for me, it's always going to come back to whole foods, which is what Weston A Price really is. It's just whole foods. It's let's eat, head to hoof. Let's eat the whole animal, use the bones, prize those organ meats. We still eat greens. We still eat vegetables. We still eat beans. We still eat, all these legumes, whatever you want. You eat it all. It's just the way you prepare it, right? You just prepare. It's how you prepare these things and the sources that they come from. And so, you can eat real whole foods, and it's the simplest. It's very simple, and it's been really helpful for me. And I just wanted to say, I'm trying to think if there's anything not weird, or like anything that I particularly do, for anyone who's worried about preparation stuff, crock pot meals, always for them. Roasting stuff, always for it. Make it simple on yourself. You can make it simple. It doesn't have to be crazy. You can buy sourdough if you're not a sourdough maker. I'm still not. I've done it a couple times. I have made my own kombucha though, and my own kefir, which was quite fun for me. And I loved it. Although like with kefir, it turns over so fast. You just have like so much of it. Like, you're making it all the time, and your stuff. And it's actually not hard. Kefir's the easiest to make. But anyway, all of that to say, like, you can find a ton of tips and tricks. There's tons of resources here that we've already talked about this, but the end all be all is about you. How much do you want this? What do you want? What do you want? Are you ready? And if you're having blocks around this, not just because you disagree with the food protocol or whatever, but if you're having some kind of trigger or reaction, maybe it's something to look at. Like, is there a belief inside of you that you can't eat healthy? Is there a belief inside of you that it has to be hard to eat healthy? Is there a belief inside of you that you don't like healthy foods? And maybe there's something to look out there, because, the more that you optimize for this and the more that you heal your body, the more you'll heal your spirit, and vice versa.
I love that. Thank you so much, Julie. All right. Well, I hope that helped you guys figure out a little bit more on the steps and the things in our experiences. And Thanks so much for listening and have a great week.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening and share with someone you know. See you next week.